In this short video, we're going to be answering one simple question about Eurostoxx 50 futures contracts. Does size matter? We're going to be comparing the full-size Eurostoxx 50 futures contracts with the micro-size Eurostoxx 50 futures contracts. First of all, what are the Eurostoxx 50 micro futures contracts? So the ticker here on the Eurex platform is FSXE. That compares to the full-size Eurostoxx futures contract, which is FESX. The only difference between these two contracts is that the micro contracts are 1/10 of the size of the full-size contracts. In other words, the full-size traditional Eurostoxx 50 futures contracts have a value of 10 euros per point. In other words, when the index is 4,400, one full-size contract is worth about 44,000 euros. Whereas the micro-size contracts have a value of 1 euro per point. That is, when the index is at 4,400, one micro contract has a value of 4,400 euros. The difference between the two can also be seen in the relative margin requirements, with the initial margin requirement of the micro contract being hundreds of euros, while the initial margin for the full-size Eurostoxx 50 contract is in the thousands of euros. The volumes and the overall trading sizes of the micro contracts are, of course, much, much smaller, as these tend to appeal to retail traders and those that are doing incremental small adjustments to their portfolio exposure to the Eurostoxx 50, whereas large institutions that need to trade in the millions will continue trading the larger full-size contracts. But as we'll see here, arbitrages basically will keep these prices in line. You're not going to see cases where the micro futures contracts will trade at a very different price than the full-size contract, because there will always be market makers there keeping those two prices in line. Here's a quick snapshot of what the depth of market is on the micro Eurostoxx 50 contract during Asian hours. So this was on the 29th of November, 2023 at 5:50 a.m. Frankfurt time. So this is just before 1 p.m. Singapore time. And here we see that we don't have an enormous amount of depth of book. We only have one contract that we could sell at 43.5650, and we'd have to give up 50 cents if we wanted to go down to 52 contracts at 43.56. On the other side, we've got 4 contracts and 3 contracts, respectively, at 43.58 and 43.5850. And we'd have to pay up to 43.59 if we wanted to get the liquidity of 54 contracts. But granted, many traders trading micro-sized contracts are usually just trading a few contracts, usually not trading 50 contracts. So if you look at how much liquidity there is, even during Asian hours, for up to 50 contracts of the micros, we can see that there's not much of a concern of really getting a good pricing or good liquidity, even during Asian hours. If we were to compare that with the liquidity you can get on the full-size contracts, now remember, each full-size contract is 10 times the value of a micro contract. We see that it's 1 point wide for well over 100 contracts on both sides. So if you could say comparably, there's almost 1,000 times the liquidity on the full-size contract. But again, that really matters more to those that are trading in size. If you're trading just a few contracts, the price is seen, even with 50-cent increments on the micro contracts, is probably good enough for most of those purposes. If you look on the Eurex, there are a few other contracts also available in micro sizes. One of the first that may come to mind is the German DAX index, the DAX 40, benchmark of 40 blue chip German stocks. The micro contracts on those is also worth 1 euro per point. The index is currently around 16,000, so one of those contracts will be worth about 16,000 euros. So almost 4 times the size of a micro Eurostoxx 50 future, but that'll give you some comparison if you wanted to trade micro DAX versus micro Eurostoxx. One advantage of the DAX, though, is that there's also micro-sized DAX options. When we talk about options, the Eurostoxx 50 options are only available in full size, worth around 44,000 euros per contract, whereas DAX has both full-size options and micro-sized options if you want to trade options on smaller sized European index exposure. There's also a micro contract on the Swiss market index, the Swiss SMI. The value of that contract is 1 Swiss franc per point, with the index currently around 11,000. That's 11,000 Swiss francs per micro SMI contract. Also worth mentioning here is the VSTOXX contract, which is technically not a micro contract because it's the only contract tracking the VSTOXX. That one has a relatively small size of 100 euros per point for an index that tends to swing between 10 and 50. So a total contract value of 1,000 to 5,000 euros. So I would group the VSTOXX futures contracts in the category of the micros because they're available to trade in those sizes. Well, that's our discussion of micro versus full-size Eurostoxx 50 and other micro-size contracts on Eurex. Join us next when we're going to be talking more about option strategies.